Assalamu alaikum, good day. This is a story from a time when minds that worked differently were called cursed, when children were expected to walk in straight lines, and those who wandered became shame or silence. The 19th century had faded into dusk. The year was 1907, British India. In a quiet riverside town called Mithankot, where the mighty Indus flowed like an old memory, and life followed rhythm, prayers, recitations, rules. It was a world without words like autism or neurodivergence. If a child didn't speak like others, he was called rude. If he cried at sounds others ignored, he was called weak. If he spoke in riddles instead of rote, he was mocked, feared, or beaten. This is the story of Zahir, a boy who spoke, just not in the language that world expected. A child whose silence wasn't emptiness, but language of its own. This is the story of a boy who survived not by being understood, but by being felt. Mithankot, a sleepy riverside town where the mighty Indus curved like a sleeping serpent and where every soul knew its place. Children memorized Persian couplets, men recited land texts from memory, and women whispered folk songs while grinding grain. In this world, language was duty, expression was conformity, anything else was madness. Then came Zahir. Zahir was 9, verbal but not conventional. He spoke in fragments of poetry, mimicked the buzzing of bees, and repeated questions that adults didn't have time to answer. Does the sun sleep when we close our eyes? Why don't shadows ever touch the moon? Is a lie still a lie if no one hears it? Most people brushed him off. Na samajh hai. He doesn't understand. Some said he was touched by jinn. Others said he was lazy, spoiled, and disobedient. He cried when the mangoes were cut with a jagged knife. He screamed when the blacksmith's hammer rang too loud. He laughed during funerals, not out of disrespect, but because the sobbing voices sounded like flutes to him. His father, Munshi Ghulam Rasool, was a clerk in the Tehsil office, a man of rules and records. He wanted a son who spoke in straight lines. Zahir spoke in spirals. When the boy couldn't recite his Arabic lesson but could perfectly mimic the clanging of temple bells, the Maulvi Sahab accused him of mocking religion. He was beaten, told to speak like a Muslim boy. Only one person saw something else. Mamu Hammad. Hammad didn't look at him with judgment, but with depth. Hammad, Jannat Bibi's younger brother, had been away in Multan, spending years immersed in books, ideas, and quiet observation. He was the kind of man who noticed the way birds paused between flights, who listened to silence as if it were a language. When he returned to Mithankot, he noticed Zahir instantly. He didn't try to correct him, fix him, or force speech out of him. He simply observed. He listened. He understood what others discarded. One evening he saw Zahir tracing circles in the dirt of the river, whispering softly, "Water doesn't ask for direction." Hamad sat beside him and gently replied, "And neither do you." Hamad didn't ask Zahir questions. He watched, he listened. One evening he found Zahir sitting by the riverbank, throwing pebbles and whispering, "The water never forgets." Hamad sat beside him and softly said, "Neither do you." Over the weeks, Hamad noticed that Zahir responded not to commands, but to patterns. He taught him to whistle rags on the bansuri. He showed him how to understand the rhythm of footsteps and the rustling of wheat fields. Zahir began opening up, not through grammar, but through movement, music, and metaphor. He painted with mud, traced patterns in the sand, and hummed lullabies backward. Hamad called it Chup Ki Zaban, the language of silence. But the world had no room for silent languages. One day the village elder caught Zahir pretending to talk to the banyan tree and accused him of bringing shame to the family. That night Munshi Ghulam Rasool exploded. He locked Zahir in the grain room for 2 days with no light, talked like a normal child or never speak again. Zahir didn't speak again for weeks. He just stared at the ceiling and repeated one phrase, "Water doesn't need permission to flow." Hamad intervened. With fierce pleading, he convinced Zahir's mother to let the boy live with him in Multan. "You want him to survive here by killing who he is?" he told her. "Let him live somewhere his silence isn't a curse." It broke her heart, but she agreed. Years passed. In the alleys of old Multan, people whispered about a soft-eyed young man who played the flute near the shrines. He never spoke in full sentences, but remembered everything he heard. He could describe pain without saying it hurts. His name was Zahir, but most called him Sannata, the quiet one. They said his music could still water, calm animals, and remind you of someone you had forgotten. Back in Mithankot, they never spoke of Zahir again. He was remembered as the mad one who left. But Hamad knew Zahir had not been cured, he had been heard. Zahir did not fail to speak, the world failed to listen. In a time and place where language was weapon and conformity was survival, Zahir crafted a third path, not resistance, not obedience, but meaning without translation. His silence was not absence, it was depth. But not every Zahir survived. History is full of children like him, brilliant, curious, and misunderstood. Children who asked the wrong questions, who couldn't sit still in classrooms, who felt too much or spoke in a rhythm that world didn't recognize. Some were locked away, some were silenced by shame, some were punished for not fitting in, and their brilliance died quietly, never having had the chance to shine, and yet a few made it through. Historians now believe that Isaac Newton, one of the greatest scientific minds of all time, showed clear signs of autism. Nikola Tesla, the genius of electricity, lived in isolation, fixated on patterns and numbers. Emily Dickinson, whose poetry reshaped the soul of literature, barely spoke to anyone outside her home. These were not flaws in their design, they were different kinds of brilliance. They weren't broken, the world simply didn't know how to listen. And today in the villages, towns and cities of South Asia, countless Zahir-like children are still being told, "You're slow, you're rude, you're mad, be normal." They are misunderstood in schools, misdiagnosed by doctors and punished by families. Their voices, fragile, poetic and real, are being lost every single day. How many Newtons and Teslas, how many Dickinsons and Zahirs have we already silenced? And how many more will we silence before we finally learn to listen? Thank you. Have a nice day. Make life easy for others.